Have you ever heard the saying, never underestimate someone just because they're quiet? I was once called sweetheart in my own boardroom. Three powerful men walked in, assuming I was just the one there to pour their coffee. They laughed, made remarks, touched me like I was nothing more than decoration. But within minutes, they were hit with a truth they couldn't swallow. I was the CEO, the very person they had come to negotiate a $50 million deal with. And from that moment, a war began, not just about me, but about an entire system of power that had grown too comfortable dismissing women. This is my story. Chapter 1: The Horrifying Meeting. 10 years ago, when I founded this company, I made myself a promise. No need to flaunt a fancy title, no need to put on the image of a powerful CEO. I wore a Zara blazer, ordinary trousers, and almost no one outside the team knew I was the one running everything. I wanted my success to be recognized through results, not labels. So, when a major investment fund scheduled a meeting to discuss acquiring the company for $50 million, I prepared every figure, every report with precision. I walked into the boardroom. My boardroom sat down at the head of the table and waited. The door opened. Richard Brennan, a legendary name in finance, walked in with two associates. The moment he saw me, without so much as a greeting, he sat himself right down in the chair at the head of the table. Then, as if I were a server, he leaned back and said, "Coffee, sweetheart. I like it sweet, like you." I froze, and that was only the beginning. His eyes scanned me from head to toe as if I were a display item. Another man, Tom, was tapping away on his phone, texting, barely acknowledging the meeting. David stared openly at my chest without shame. I began presenting the numbers I had carefully prepared, but Brennan threw up a hand like he was stopping traffic, cutting me off with a sneer. "Wait for Mark to get here. You can show him the data. You probably wouldn't understand it anyway." They burst out laughing like three teenage boys stumbling across their dad's old Playboy stash. Tom glanced at the wall, spotted my Businesswoman of the Year award. He took it down, examined it, then scoffed. "Oh, cute. Looks like one of those kids' soccer trophies. Do they hand this out to every Etsy shop lady?" I clenched my jaw, but before I could react, David came closer, lowering his voice. "Your company needs a real CEO. A man with authority. Mark seems way too soft." His hand brushed against my arm and I froze stiff. The breaking point came when Brennan opened my desk drawer and pulled out a box of spare tampons. Holding it up with a smirk, he said, "Ah, so this explains why your business plan is so emotional. Female hormones, right?" The three of them closed in on me, hands pressing against my shoulders, the table, and Tom even resting his on my thigh, whispering, "Pretty faces don't last forever, you know. Might as well make use of it before it's too late. We'll gut this company, toss you a little piece or else. We'll tell everyone you're impossible to work with." I felt trapped. My own familiar boardroom suddenly felt like a prison cell. They laughed, and I had to swallow down every trembling breath. And then a knock on the door. My assistant stepped in, announcing, "Mrs. Lee, your 3 o'clock is here." Brennan's face twisted with annoyance. Tom muttered something about Mark's wife. Then the door swung open. Mark walked in, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and smiled. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce my wife. And the CEO, the founder of the company you're trying to buy." The room went dead silent. Their faces drained of color, chairs scraped back, a phone slipped onto the table. And me, for the first time in that meeting, I felt a surge of triumph. No shouting, no proving, just one simple truth was enough to strip them bare, exposing every bit of their pathetic arrogance. Chapter 2: The First Counterattack, an Unexpected Alliance. The moment Mark walked in and introduced me as the CEO, it was as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped on all three of them. Richard Brennan shot up so fast his chair toppled backward. Tom pressed himself against the wall, stammering incoherently. David dropped his phone, his face burning crimson. I sat still, arms crossed, watching their panic, and for the first time I felt the balance of power had shifted. Less than an hour later, security escorted the three of them out of the building, no different than rowdy drunks thrown out of a bar. But to me, that was just a warm-up. I knew men like them wouldn't swallow humiliation so easily. They would scramble to recover, to deny, to twist everything into a misunderstanding, and I had no intention of letting them. The next morning, I opened my laptop and replayed the footage from the boardroom security camera. No room for debate hands on my shoulders, predatory stares, sleazy laughter, even Tom's hand resting on my thigh, all captured in detail. When the clock on the screen ticked to 2:47, Brennan's hand touched me. Everything was crystal clear, undeniable. I sent the video straight to my attorney, Wendelin. She only had to watch once before she said, "We're holding gold here, and I promise you they'll regret this." But I didn't stop there. I drafted a short post on LinkedIn. Just a few lines about the importance of choosing your investors wisely. No names, no direct accusations. And yet, the ripple effect was beyond anything I expected. The post went viral, thousands of shares, and suddenly tech media began asking what really happened behind those closed boardroom doors. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Other investors called, eager to step in with alternative deals. Meanwhile, Harrison Ventures, the firm those three men worked for, was scrambling into crisis mode. They offered to double the acquisition price on one condition: I'd sign an NDA and stay silent. I put them on speaker, let the whole office listen, then hung up mid-call. What they didn't know was that I had recorded every word. And then came the unexpected twist. One evening, Mark received a message from Penelope, Tom's wife. She'd seen the rumors online, knew her husband had just been fired. Her message dripped with rage. Penelope wanted to meet me. At first I was cautious, thinking she might be there to defend him, but our meeting at Starbucks completely blindsided me. She sat across from me, eyes red from crying, and slid a stack of documents across the table: photos, receipts, text messages. Turns out she had secretly been collecting evidence of Tom's affairs and shady behavior for months, preparing for divorce. And now, after hearing of his harassment in my company, she had made her decision. She was on my side. We sat there for hours, sipping lattes, gone cold, forming the strangest of alliances, two women with nothing in common bound together by the same despicable man. I left Starbucks that day with a USB full of evidence, and for the first time in my life, with the sense that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Chapter 3: Media Eruption and Social Backlash. My LinkedIn post spread faster than a Taylor Swift ticket frenzy. Within 24 hours, my inbox was overflowing. Some praised me for being brave, others speculated wildly, and a few came right out and asked, was it Harrison Ventures? I stayed silent. The more silent I was, the louder the storm grew. Tech blogs caught the scent of drama. Headlines with clickbait flair popped up everywhere. Who's harassing the mystery female CEO and which investor lost his job in 48 hours? On Twitter. Silicon Valley turned it into a theater, one side, cheering a win for women in business, the other side screaming that cancel culture is destroying innocent men's careers. But the noise didn't just stay online. It started seeping into my real life. The school called. My daughter's principal vaguely mentioned that some parents are asking uncomfortable questions about our family. Turns out a group of mothers had begun whispering behind my back, claiming I had fabricated the story to ruin three men's careers. In the fallout, my daughter was quietly uninvited from birthday parties, her weekend playdates suddenly drying up. I stood outside the school gates watching her walk out, clutching her backpack, eyes red, asking why Emma hadn't invited her anymore. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, because your mother stood up to three powerful creeps, but she's only 12. How could I possibly explain? Meanwhile, the three men weren't staying idle. They launched their counterattacks. Brennan started dialing every contact, whining about being set up. Tom reinvented himself as the pitiful father betrayed by his wife. Career ruined over one careless comment. And David, he went to the press, crying that he was only testing my competency on Mark's behalf, that I had misinterpreted his good intentions. What a joke. They grabbed my thigh, called me sweetheart in front of a whole room, and now it was just a misunderstanding. The scariest part wasn't their lies, it was how quickly the public swallowed them. Some actually believed it. Some even messaged me directly, "You wicked woman," destroying men just to get attention. Even in the WhatsApp group of female founders, a place that had always been a source of solidarity, things began to fracture. Some of the women stood firmly by me, fiercely defending me, but others worried that the scandal would ruin fundraising opportunities for all women. The group splintered people quietly, slipping out one by one. I sat in my office watching notifications flood in and felt it in my bones. This was no longer just a personal showdown between me and those three men. This had become a war that spread into the community, touching reputations, careers, my family, and even my daughter. And I knew from that moment on there was no turning back. Chapter 4: Escalation into All-Out War. When the media firestorm hit, I thought I could simply sit back and let public opinion do the work. But no, those three men didn't choose silence. They chose war. And I had no choice but to step in with them. In the days that followed, I began to grasp just how dangerous this game had become. Brennan spread rumors that I had fabricated the story to jack up the company's valuation. Tom played the martyr, showing up on podcasts to whine about being abandoned by his wife, his career ruined over a harmless joke in a boardroom. And David, he cried about suffering emotional trauma, insisting I had misread every signal. Each of them tried to twist the narrative, painting me as the villain of my own story. Worse, they attempted to fracture my own ranks. A board member suggested I should temporarily step down as CEO to protect the company's image. I stared at him, torn between laughter and bitterness. Did they really think I'd retreat after being humiliated so publicly? But what suffocated me the most were the looks around me. Some employees avoided me in the hallways as if I carried a ticking bomb. Old friends stopped texting. Even at home, Mark grew more uneasy, asking sharp questions. "Are you sure you want to keep pushing this? When is enough? Enough?" Especially now that our daughter is being dragged into it, I knew he cared, but I also recognized the doubt in his eyes. It cut deeper than any headline. And that's when I realized if they could play dirty, so could I. I began reaching out to their wives, their former colleagues, arranging coincidental encounters at grocery stores, coffee shops. I didn't accuse them outright, I just nudged to let them spill on their own. Complaints. Fragments of texts, whispered secrets, slowly pieced together a larger picture. These men had done this before to other female founders. I was just the first one to fight back. At times I barely recognized myself. One evening, I sat staring at a draft of emails I planned to send to the press. Emails containing personal details I would never have touched before, and I realized I was crossing a line I once swore I wouldn't. But then I remembered Tom's hand on my thigh, Brennan waving my tampons like a prop, David calling me sweetheart as if I had no brain in my skull. And I knew I had no other choice. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting to make men like them understand that actions have consequences, whether in the boardroom, in the headlines, or in their personal lives. From that moment forward, this was no longer me versus three men. It had become an all-out war. I wasn't just losing friends or allies, I was wagering my own reputation. But backing down never. Chapter 5: Legal Climax and the Final Blows. If the media was the noisy battlefield, then the legal arena was the silent war, far more brutal. I was used to numbers reports and investment contracts, but here I realized every single word in an email, every line of text, every grainy video clip could become a weapon aimed to kill. My attorney, Wendeline, scrutinized everything. Night after night, she sat beside me, replaying the boardroom footage over and over. From one angle, Tom's hand on my thigh was undeniable. But from another, they could argue he was merely reaching for his phone. That ambiguity alone made my stomach turn. They wasted no time exploiting it. In their filings, Brennan and his allies claimed I had orchestrated the situation, that I had a history of hostile clashes with male competitors. They even dug up an incident 3 years ago when I called out another CEO for sexism, twisting it into a narrative that I had a pattern of trapping men to gain business advantage. Reading those accusations felt like being dragged into the mud. The very things I was proud of my negotiation skills, my ability to stand tall in a male-dominated world, were being weaponized against me. Then came the emails and texts from years ago. Once in a private chat with a female colleague, I had jokingly said we should use our womanly charm in negotiations. Just a throwaway remark. Yet in court filings, it became a confession that I deliberately exploited my gender for gain. Worse, they twisted private moments. A security camera clip of me sipping wine after hours was framed as evidence that I was frequently impaired at work. Utter nonsense, but in the hands of seasoned lawyers, it turned into a sharp blade. The isolation began to close in. Some colleagues, afraid of being dragged into litigation, backed away. A few board members wavered, muttering about the company's larger interests. Even friends in the industry, those who once loudly championed women's rights, fell silent. But I couldn't retreat. I fought back. With everything, I had more evidence, more testimonies, more witnesses I'd convinced to speak. I released documents proving Tom had faced multiple prior harassment complaints, all quietly buried with payouts. I submitted internal chat logs where they bragged about teaching me a lesson. Each counterstrike I made, they hit back. A photo of me smiling with colleagues at a company party was plastered online with the caption, "Does this look like the face of a harassment victim?" I realized this was no longer about who was right or wrong. It had morphed into a chess match, every move costing reputation money, and sometimes even the trust of those closest to me. And with each opponent's piece, I managed to topple. I could feel it. I was also losing fragments of myself, one by one. Chapter 6, The Trial and the Bitter Verdict. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom with a heart weighed down like stone. For months, we had hurled filings, evidence videos, and text messages back and forth like bullets. But standing before the jury, I knew one thing. Truth alone wasn't enough. It was how the truth was told that would matter. I recounted every detail, the hand on my shoulder, the filthy stares, the word sweetheart repeated over and over, as if I were nothing more than decor in the boardroom, not its CEO. I kept my voice steady, no shouting, no tears. Gwendolyn had warned me, let the truth speak. Don't let them paint you as the hysterical woman. Then came Brennan. He stood sharp in his tailored suit, speaking with crisp authority. He claimed I had misinterpreted friendliness, that it was all just inappropriate jokes, not harassment. Tom played the pitiful father, lamenting that his career was ruined, his children scarred, and David, he cried trembling as he said he had genuinely thought there was chemistry between us. Looking at him, I felt both disgust and sorrow. The delusion of men could be that dangerous. And then the shock. Brennan's own son was unexpectedly called as a witness. He testified bluntly his father had for years kept a women's rating book, scoring them by looks and willingness. In that notebook, my name was circled with the note, "Needs to be taught a lesson. Too cold." The courtroom erupted. Brennan went pale, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of real hope. When the enhanced video was shown, the moment Tom's hand landed on my thigh was unmistakable. No room for excuses, no accidental touch left to argue. But the final verdict wasn't the clean victory I had dreamed of. The jury confirmed, yes, harassment had occurred, but the damages awarded were far less than expected because they claimed I had contributed to escalating the conflict. In plain terms, I won, but only halfway. As the verdict was read, there was no rush of triumph, just emptiness. I had won on paper, but lost in spirit. The headline screamed, "Female CEO wins harassment suit, damages slashed." Online forums split in two. Some celebrated, others sneered. What did she gain from destroying 3 families? I left the courthouse that day feeling like I had staggered out of a storm, alive. Yes, but surrounded only by wreckage. And deep down, I knew this war was far from over. Chapter 7: Consequences and the Legacy Left Behind. I thought after the trial, everything would finally close, but it didn't. That was only the pause between battles, and the real cost began to surface. The 3 men lost their jobs. Their careers shattered, their families fractured. But I didn't walk out of the war unscathed either. The company lost several major clients who didn't want to be dragged into media controversy. Some of my best employees, worn down by the constant pressure, chose to leave. I sat in my office staring at the empty chairs, feeling a mix of bitterness and guilt. My daughter wasn't spared either. Parents at her school still whispered, still avoided us. One day, she ran into my room and handed me a scribbled piece of paper. "Mom, you are my dragon slayer." I held her tight, sobbing. That piece of paper was worth more than any contract, any settlement. As for me, I lost friends, I lost part of my image in the eyes of the community, and I even lost some of my faith in perfect justice. But in return, I gained something more important: precedent. We implemented a vetting system for investors, before negotiations, screening for harassment allegations, consulting female founders who had dealt with them, setting clear standards for behavior. Soon, other startups followed. The tech industry, for the first time, was forced to stare into the darkness it had long pretended not to see. And when I looked back, I understood the real victory wasn't the damages awarded, nor the humiliation those 3 men suffered. The victory was that future female CEOs would no longer have to sit trembling in boardrooms called Sweetheart and dismiss the way I once was. I lost much in this war, but I also carved a path forward, and that, I realized, will be the legacy I leave behind. In the end, I can't say I walked out of this battle whole. I lost friends, I lost allies, and I sacrificed the peace of my own family. But I also gained something far more important: change. Those 3 men fell, but now hundreds, maybe thousands of women in tech will walk into boardrooms with a different kind of power because I dared to fire the first shot. If there's one thing I've learned through it all, it's this: justice rarely comes complete. But the moment you choose to stand up, you've already made a difference. And sometimes that alone is enough.